Hello and welcome to Jewelry City Steampunk Festival. I'm Jessica Lucci and I'm going to be providing two spooky stories for your entertainment pleasure. I want to thank Jewelry City Steampunk Festival for having me. This is so exciting. How wonderful to be able to do an online event to celebrate our steampunk community. And Jewelry City is just top notch. And I'm just so thrilled to be here sharing this time with you. Again, I'm Jessica Lucci. I'm the author of several steampunk works, including the Watch City Steampunk trilogy, which I encourage you to check out. It's full of empowered woman and science and technology, engineering and maths, which is STEAM for steampunk. I also want to thank the Waltham Cultural Council and the Massachusetts Cultural Council for sponsoring events such as this for me so I can provide these readings. That really helps out a lot. And I have some news for you before we begin our reading from Steampunk Leap Year. I have two spooky stories to read to you today, but before we get to that, I want to announce to you, first time on video announcing this, I just completed a new book of short stories because you love my short stories so much and I appreciate that. So I wrote another book of short stories called Steampunk New Year, which will be available to you on November 1st through either Amazon on my Jessica Lucci page or through my Etsy page, Jessica Lucci Books, which just won an honorable mention award. So that was pretty cool. And also I'm going to be offering podcasts on the first of every month. So please join me on my Jessica Lucci Facebook page for that. If you liked these readings today, then you're going to like our further readings on my Jessica Lucci Facebook podcast. I'm so grateful to be here today. And without further ado, here is our first story from Steampunk Leap Year that I'm going to read to you, called Silver and Orange. Now, my short stories are quite short. They're meant for people who just want a short little break. It's actually called flash fiction. It's a bit shorter than a full short story. So that's why I find it to be entertaining. It's more pleasurable for me to read at leisure without having to put bookmarks in, and it's good for people with short attention spans. So enjoy this story, Silver and Orange. The girl waved her wand. It spun in her hand and propellers snapped open from the top. She opened her fist, allowing the silver stick to float away like a puff of dandelion fluff. The wand hovered ahead of her, awaiting her command. Her fingers interlaced between themselves, spelling out unspeakable words in a private language only she and her wand could understand. The thin wand shone in autumn's first moonbeams. It alighted upon a heart-shaped leaf and trembled. The large leaf shuddered in a cool midnight breeze. Silver from the wand trailed upon the edges of the heart like a leaking pen on thick paper. The silver lining spread through stems and stalks, and the plant erupted in long tendrils, stretching across barren ground beneath which slept a grove of beans. The vines thickened and rose, curling upon themselves. The girl's fingers gestured furiously, and the wand rose, leading the plant to stretch higher and twirl faster. A flash of yellow exploded into an orange orb. It glowed softly and expanded. As it became rounder, it solidified and the glow ebbed. The girl pressed her fingers to her lips and blew an invisible kiss. The wand propelled towards her and gently landed in her outstretched palms. She held the wand to her heart before entwining it in her thick hair. She turned and nodded to the scarecrows standing guard behind her. They marched toward her, pulling a burlap bundle over rocky soil. Their straw feet brushed against remnants of summer's brief life. Swishing breaths of death gusted in small swirls of dust. The large sack was dumped out at the girl's feet. The creature within landed with a thud that shook the dry earth. The girl's hair shone silver. Her eyes met his. Voiceless with horror, the young man's mouth formed a hollow hole. His screamless face contorted with the untold pain of his past, that which he had caused and for which he would soon suffer. One word climbed up the girl's throat. Peter. Stars exploded in the crimson sky and rained shards of burnt energy upon the kneeling figure. His eyes melted in their sockets, bleeding orange tears onto his pallid cheeks. The wand rose of its own accord from her hair, leaving tangles to flow free in the night. Her eyes matched the shine of her heart's contraption, and a laser beam of power connected the gushing orange flesh of Peter's empty eye holes to the large globular fruit tinged with silver in the newly grown patch. Peter's shell shattered and disintegrated in the focus of her heart's wand. Her gaze drifted to the giant pumpkin, and the fragmented molecules of her former lover's body immersed within the seedy sphere. The wand wound itself back in her hair, and orange leaves rained upon the pumpkin patch, shrouding Peter's tomb in piles of shed dead glory. So that is Silver and Orange, a creepy story from Steampunk Leap Year. So I got the inspiration from that from the childhood poem Peter, Peter, Pumpkin Eater, had a wife and loved to beat her. Not very nice. Not nice. So I thought, what if the wife had some magical powers and she could have her revenge? And so came Silver and Orange. Instead, we like to say Peter, Peter, Pumpkin Eater, had a wife and liked to treat her very well. That's much better. My next story is Cheaper by the Dozen, which is a little bit longer, but it's still flash fiction. A short story that's much shorter than your typical short story. And so without further ado, Cheaper by the Dozen. A young man shuffles down the sidewalk. Every day he goes to the florist and buys a single red rose. Finally, the florist asks, "Why a new rose every day?" "It's 'cause the wife is pregnant and has terrible morning sickness, so I step out here on the bright about the time you set up here. Then I go on in to lay a rose on her nightstand before I take a sleep between shifts." The florist says, "You know what? They're cheaper by the dozen. You pay for a dozen roses up front and get a rose each day. Every 12 days, you pay me for another dozen." "It's a generous offer, thank you. You just take care of that woman and get yourself some shut-eye too. I'll do both gladly." The young man tips his hat and yomps home. So he does this thing the florist said, coming in and paying ahead for a bargain. A fortnight passes, and each day his teeth clog with dirt, his shod feet immerse in sweat, and his calloused hands deliver a tender rose. One evening at work, his boss is fuming like a broken flu, wheezing throughout a bout of financial fury. He screams in the young man's face, spitting flecks of spittle. "We overbought because of your miscalculations. What am I going to do now? Eat dirt?" So he sits through the hollering and takes the boss's hot breath like brick. He just sits there listening and contemplating, not quite meeting his boss's eyes. Then, when the riot of words fizzle out, he looks up. His pupils have a glint of something shining in them. The boss lays his heavy hands upon the young man's burly shoulders. "What have you got to say for yourself then, boy?" "Cheaper by the dozen." Pink, then red, then speckled with crimson splotches and white patches, the boss tightens and relaxes his grip, tightens and relaxes, willing himself not to strangle the lad right then and there. His heart skips one beat, then two, and he opens his mouth in a round expression of insight. He steps back and just stares for a moment. Then he lunges and gives the strapping worker a hug, the likes of which he has never given any of his sons. Brilliant, simply brilliant. The florist notices how the young man's clothes are new, not patched up, not layered in dust. He is happy for him, and for himself too, as his flower cart empties quicker every day, and his purse grows heavy in his pocket. 12 days and 12 days pass. The young man doesn't go get more flowers. The florist wonders if the wife is feeling better or if the baby is born. Eventually, he stops peering down the way for him. Then one early morning, the florist sees the young man walking towards him. He doesn't speak, only takes a dozen roses and leaves. That's strange, thinks the florist. Being successful enough, he postpones his day and rents a bot to watch over the floral stand, and he follows the young man. They go up, down, through town, and reach Mount Feek, the cemetery. There is a new field of turned sod. Fresh plots bear no grass in the frosty morning. The florist watches the young man join a small group, an older couple, a man in black, a grave digger with a shovel. The florist realizes in heartbreak what has happened and returns to his cart. That evening he packs up and pulls out the special bouquet he has saved all day, 12 perfect roses. He walks up alone to pay his respects to the young mother he never met. The wind turns as it is wont to do in this county at this time of year. The florist pulls his coat tighter around him, mindful not to crush the flowers. As he nears the grave, he sees two figures. A lamplight glimmers in the growing darkness. "Ahoy! Who goes there?" shouts a familiar voice. "It is I, Simon de Fleur, come to pay my respects." His short strides bring him slowly closer to the mysterious men at the grave. Then he recognizes the voice. "Oh, dear lad, I am pitifully sorrowful at your misfortune." The young man jangles his pockets. They clang with gold coins. "I've no misfortune. As you wisely told me, they're cheaper by the dozen." He spreads his left arm out grandly, gesturing to the half-filled plots. Simon de Fleur sees the glint of gold in the grave digger's eyes, just as the shovel lands. So, that story was called Cheaper by the Dozen. It's about a young man who buys a rose for his pregnant wife every day, but he's very poor. So the florist offers him a deal out of mercy to buy them cheaper by the dozen, which is very generous. But then the man and his boss come across the idea of buying funeral plots, cemetery plots, cheaper by the dozen. And why not kill the wife off as your first victim? Take care of a lot of problems that way, right? So sad, so sad, so sad. So I hope you enjoyed my reading from Steampunk Leap Year. And I do want to say one more thing. I came out with my first ever children's book for young children. These would be for preschool and pre-K. It's called Lunchtime Choo-Choo. And it's about two friends who board a steam train every day and have in quest of the perfect lunch. And kids love it because it's funny and it has two whimsical friends, and adults love it because it has little nutrition aspects stuck in there sneakily. But I highly recommend this for children as a nighttime story or as a lunchtime story or a nap time story. I know some families who like to read during lunch. Like instead of reading for nap time, they read during lunch and then have the child take a little rest. And this is the perfect story for that. So I hope you enjoyed my discussion today. And again, you can find out more about me on my Amazon page. Just look up Jessica Lucci. That's Lucci, L-U-C-C-I. And you can find me on Facebook on my Jessica Lucci page. And I have a website. And if you subscribe to my blog, Buddies with Benefits, then you get a free short story every month. And this is an unpublished short story. So you get to have new books and new stories ahead of time before anybody else, which is pretty cool. And I don't spam, I'm not spammy. So you won't get emails from me all the time. It will just be mainly the free short story and maybe a couple of other news updates. But that's all. Just enough to enjoy and keep track of the newest things going on in my little world. So, oh here, look at Lamar wants to say hello. Hello, Lamar. Goodbye, Lamar. So that was her moment of fame. And yeah, so check out my website. It's www.jessicalucci.org. So remember, it's .org and not .com, it's .org. And I want to thank you again. Thank you, Jewelry City Steampunk Festival, for having me. This has been so much fun to share my short stories with you. And I hope you continue to enjoy the Jewelry City Steampunk Festival. I know I will. All right, may your clocks always chime. Bye-bye.